From the outset of the broadcast, the mood was tense. 2 additional hostages recently released by Hamas had arrived back in Israel, and officials said they had returned all of the dead hostages they could find. Israel, however, declared that this was not good enough and threatened to resume hostilities should Hamas fail to comply fully with the ceasefire terms. According to the latest reports, Israel has already directed its military leadership to devise plans for a total defeat of Hamas if the group fails to abide by the agreement. In effect, the option of renewed war has not been abandoned. One guest who joined the broadcast described the moment as historic, attributing the current coalition of Arab, Muslim and European support to the leadership of President Trump. He framed the conflict not merely as a short-term ceasefire, but as a fundamental recalibration of the Middle East order. He said, this is a coalition of Arab, Muslim and European backing he brought together, not just about Gaza. It is future of Middle East, brand new Middle East. He argued that Trump's plan, presented as a 20-point roadmap, lays groundwork for full normalization with Israel, and claimed that the president's team was actively working to cement the initiative. He further credited past US military interventions. He declared that comes because of brave US military men who flew B-52 bombers and took out Iran's nuclear program. That paved way for us to be at the moment we are right now, which is peace after 2 years of war and fighting which began under Joe Biden's feckless presidency. The guest attributed ongoing progress to the military pressure applied on Iran and elsewhere. When asked about the boldness of launching deep strikes over foreign territory without certainty of success, the guest countered with rhetorical questions. Had those operations not occurred, where would the hostages be? He emphasized the strains of returning to full conflict, but urged that Hamas must disarm. When pressed about Hamas's possible refusal, he said, if they don't disarm, we will disarm them. He insisted that when President Trump speaks, he says what he means and means what he says. He predicted that diplomacy through nations like Qatar, Egypt and regional players would force Hamas's hand. Yet he warned that military option is on the table. Asked whether a return to war was likely, he demurred from framing it as a relapse, but as a continuation of the plan. I wouldn't look as return to war. I would look at it as carrying out this plan that demanded Hamas must disarm. He repeatedly stressed that this coalition is in agreement on one thing: Hamas has no future in Gaza. On a more personal note, the guest offered a moment of emotional relief. The last remaining female hostage body in the area was returned, and her family can finally put her to rest, he said. He acknowledged the pain surrounding the loss. In more stark terms, killed at the Nova Musi. That phrase echoed as a solemn note, marking the place or incident connected with her death. Transition from war to negotiated order. The broadcast's framing suggests that the conflict between Israel and Hamas has partially entered a diplomatic chapter. The 20-point plan, ceasefire, release of hostages, and international backing all point toward a shift, albeit a tentative one, from open warfare to controlled transition. Heavy reliance on US leadership and personality. The guest's narrative places Trump at the center of this transformation. The emphasis on his boldness, clarity, and coalition building underscores the belief, or hope, that leadership can change strategic realities on the ground. Implicit threat of resumed military operations. Despite diplomatic progress, the rhetoric leaves the military option alive. The repeated insistence that Hamas must disarm. If they don't disarm, we will disarm them. Signals that failure to comply may be met by force. Role of regional mediators. The guest refers to Qatar, Egypt, Turkey and other allies as channels of pressure on Hamas. Indeed, mediators in those countries have been involved in earlier negotiations and may play a decisive role in enforcing compliance. Human cost and urgency. The emotional return of a hostage's remains was mentioned to underscore moral stakes, reminding audiences that the conflict's human dimension persists even amid diplomatic maneuvering. Let me expand a bit more on the broader strategic and geopolitical underpinnings. The peace framework heralded by President Trump includes a first phase, an immediate ceasefire, the release of Israeli hostages, both living and deceased, and a large prisoner exchange. In parallel, Israel is to begin withdrawal to predetermined lines, and humanitarian access to Gaza will be increased. Central to the plan is demilitarization. Hamas is expected to surrender its offensive infrastructure, tunnels, weapons, command systems, while a new security order would be overseen by an International Stabilization Force, ISF, composed of allied nations. A governance mechanism is also proposed, a Gaza International Transitional Authority, JITA, working under international oversight, staffed by Palestinian technocrats. Some reports suggest former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair may serve in leadership capacity on the board overseeing Gaza's transition. However, critical terms, particularly the disarmament of Hamas and limited future role, are hotly contested. While Hamas has agreed to release remaining hostages and hand over administrative control to technocrats, it has, according to public statements, refused to commit to full disarmament or relinquishing influence. Analysts warn that unless disarmament is fully enforced, the agreement may only represent a temporary lull before a new phase of conflict. Further, providing a multinational peacekeeping force and constructing a governance transition is complex and politically fragile in Gaza's environment. Some argue the plan underestimates Hamas's capacity to resist or reconstitute itself, especially if underlying grievances remain unresolved. Others caution that Israel's withdrawal or restraint may be difficult to maintain. The success of the initiative hinges in part on third-party mediators, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey and others, to influence Hamas. Their diplomatic weight and leverage may prove decisive in either enforcing or undermining compliance. The summit in Sharm el-Sheikh on October 13th, involving about 30 countries, aimed to solidify commitment to the plan's next steps. Though neither Israel nor Hamas directly participated, at the same time, military pressure persists. On October 15th, US Central Command publicly urged Hamas to stop targeting civilians, disarm and comply immediately, reinforcing the possibility of renewed violence. Israel, meanwhile, continues to assert it will act if the terms are violated. The narrative of preparedness for war continues to underpin diplomatic efforts. From this vantage, several scenarios emerge. Full compliance by Hamas, including disarmament, would enable the transitional governance to begin, aid operations to scale up, and potentially open a new chapter in Gaza's reconstruction. Partial compliance or foot-dragging could provoke a resumption of hostilities, as the guests forecasted. The peace framework would then risk collapse or fragmentation. Regional brokerage will be critical. If states like Qatar, Egypt and Turkey push Hamas effectively, compliance is more likely. If mediation fails, pressure may be insufficient. International enforcement via ISF and outside monitors will test whether the governance mechanisms are robust enough to manage security, reintegration and political transition. The broadcast's tone captured both optimism and cautious resolve. The repeated refrain, Hamas must disarm, we will disarm them. This coalition is in agreement. Hamas has no future in Gaza, makes clear the hard line behind the diplomatic veneer. At the same time, the emotional return of hostages reminds viewers of the human stakes behind each clause, deadline and negotiation round. If this peace effort succeeds, it could reshape Gaza's future and ripple across the Middle East. But if it fails, the region may quickly revert to the grim realities of siege, war and civilian suffering.